Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to today's discussion on recruiting and attracting educators to Iowa. I'm Liz Kennedy, Senior Product Manager at the Gazette. In my work here, I manage a longstanding local job site called Corridor Careers. And today I am thrilled to guide our discussion on recruiting and attracting educators to Iowa. I'd like to take a moment to acknowledge our sponsor, our presenting sponsor, ITC Midwest. Thank you, ITC. Please note that this session is being recorded and closed captioning is available. We encourage you to submit your questions through the Q&A function in the Whova app as we proceed. So let's meet our esteemed panelists. Today with us, we have Dr. Tammy Worrow, the Human Resources Recruitment and Retention Lead for the Cedar Rapids School District. Dr. Worrow is a former teacher, most recently seventh grade, and as former president of the Iowa State Education Association, has been nationally recognized for her efforts in mentoring and leadership. Her work extends beyond our borders, having represented the U.S. in international education summits. Next, we have Nick Proud, Chief Human Resource Officer for the Iowa City Community School District. This district serves 5 diverse communities with over 15,000 students. Nick's journey in education has evolved from being an elementary school teacher and high school coach to leading HR initiatives that have significantly diversified their teaching and administrative staff. He also enriches future educators as an adjunct professor at both the University of Iowa and Mount Mercy University. Next, we welcome Margaret Buckton, a partner at Iowa School Finance Information Services and the executive director of Urban Education Network of Iowa. With over 30 years in legislative and lobbying roles, Margaret's expertise has profoundly impacted school finance and policy developments across Iowa. She's also a professional advocate for the Rural School Advocates of Iowa. Last but not least, we have Anjuli Myers, the RAPL Program Coordinator, which stands for Region's Alternative Pathway to Iowa Licensure. Anjuli's role is pivotal in shaping professionals who aspire to teach, integrating her expertise in educational leadership and administration to foster the transition of professionals who seek a career change to teaching. Welcome, everyone. All right, we're going to kick off this discussion with just kind of a round robin on the current state of the teacher shortage in Iowa, what incentives there are, and efforts to address this shortage. So, Margaret's going to kick this off. Can you speak to this current state?
Sure, sure. And we so appreciate the opportunity to be here today, Liz, and with my expert colleagues on this panel to talk about this issue. It's a huge issue, and it's facing all kinds of different employment sectors in Iowa. It's not unique to education. We have labor shortages all over the place, right? But in education, we actually saw this labor shortage, educator shortage, starting about 15 years ago. And through the 200 districts in the Rural School Advocates of Iowa, they really felt it first. But more recently, even before the pandemic, we were starting to see shortages in key content areas. And if you look on the Department of Education's website, almost every teaching position, not just math and science, but art and special ed and English language arts and PE, I mean, you go across the whole list and you'll find that we have shortages all over the place. So we've taken a lot of steps at the state level on licensure reciprocity. So people can now come here from other states and begin teaching in Iowa without having to take 2 years worth of courses in order to get the right license. We've tried to address the retirement side of the labor force by allowing retirees to come back and work and giving some forgiveness on some of that pension payment that before they would not have been able to work after retirement. So there are lots of those things where we've tinkered around the edges on allowing different kinds of courses to count, so students could get online if a school district couldn't hire or find a teacher in a period of time, or work with community colleges and have those courses count for offering teach requirements that school districts have to offer certain content areas. But all of those things are how we work with our existing teachers. They're not how we recruit more to the field. So I'm really excited to talk about that. One program that I wanted to talk about today, and I'll probably bring it up a couple of times, is the Teacher and Para Registered Apprenticeship Grant Program. And if this was a 90-minute workshop, I would say that every single time, but I call it TPRA, so I don't have to say that every time. But it was the governor's enthusiasm, really, to use about $44 million to create 2 different tracks into the education profession. And one of them is for high school students who can actually work as para-educators while they're in high school and get their paraeducator certificate. So they don't spend the whole day, of course, they're going to school, but they might work part of a day or part of several days and get that experience, get that paraeducator certificate, earn a little bit of wage, and that hopefully encourages them to enjoy the classroom work and go on to become a teacher. And then the other track is our existing employee paraprofessionals who get on the job training. And both of these are apprenticeships, so they're regulated by the Federal Department of Labor, and it's rigorous. They have to go through all kinds of standards to get everything checked off to get that credential. But we work with, let's see, 25 different post-secondary partners to support those different credentials for paraeducators and teachers. And there are currently 84 individuals who've gotten their teacher certificate, but 771 in the pipeline right now. And I'm excited to talk about all the other things that are going on too, but I'll stop there and let my colleagues take over.
So just to clarify, you said 770 are in the pipeline?
771 current participants in the apprenticeship grant program.
Wow. Who else would like to share about what's going on in Iowa? Let's start with you, Dr. Warrow.
Well, I'll piggyback just a little bit on what Margaret said, because we were able to capitalize on that in Cedar Rapids, because what we know is if we can grab the people in our community that look like our students and they already have a niche and a love for Cedar Rapids, then we can keep them. And so we just hired our 7 of our first year teachers are right out of that program. They were our paras. We have 16 in the docket moving out. About 6 of them will move out in December. So we do have about 10 teacher openings right now. And my excitement is that we have our own ready to come in and fill that. I don't love that we have openings, but that program has been something that we know will work because they will stay. They know our kids. They know what they're getting into. And then we are working with our new grant for our high schools and our career model to really build in the capacity for a teacher model with our CTE pathways in each of our comprehensive high schools and metro. So that we're going to be utilizing Educator Rising, which is a curriculum piece, but also an organization that helps us grow our own. For example, we were going to make sure that on our application process, if a student has been one of ours and been in that program and they check the box, we're going to give them an interview. So really making sure that our people feel like they want to stay here and learn. I just wanted to piggyback on that, Margaret. That's helpful for us.
So Nick, can you share what innovative pathways are happening in Iowa City and, more about that current state for you? What does it look like day to day?
Yeah, absolutely. And we use some of the same things that, Margaret and Tammy had referenced there and discussed. And we had started kind of to grow our own with our paraprofessionals prior to the governor signing off on some of that work, and had a local bank help sponsor that and work with us. And that's been something we have really been proud of, is some of our efforts there too, and within that really focusing on diversifying our staffs as well. We continue to find the importance of working with people who want to be in Iowa. It's been challenging to recruit from other states or to do things to bring them in, but find people who are here, and then maybe they're here because of the university or they're here of some other factor. And how can we then connect with them and get them to stay and have them become part of our organization in a variety of ways. And we've had a lot of great success working on those partnerships, whether it's local universities and colleges or different groups, making sure we're hosting as many student teachers as we possibly can, and then welcoming them, finding ways to connect them into our schools as substitutes or into roles right away. And that has been really advantageous for us as we've worked through some of these pieces, along with much like Tammy mentioned Cedar Rapids. We've had our Educator Rising up for a little while now and had some great success with that. It was fun. We had our first teacher who had graduated from Liberty High School, which is our newest of our 3 comprehensive high schools. We hired he was a former student that just started with us this year as a special ed teacher, and it has been just fantastic. We did a little story on that, and it's something that we take great pride in. And that was kind of one that happened incidentally, but we have a few others that are kind of in the pipeline as well, as Margaret referred to.
Hmm. Turning to you and Julie, so this is, we're talking about grow your own, and you have with the Rapple program, that's really another version of grow your own, right? With helping those who want to career change from another profession in maybe a professional in another role, maybe an engineer or something. Can you talk a little bit about that audience and how they make that transition?
Yeah, so our pathway is the alternative licensure for teachers where you could have been a paraprofessional. If you hold a bachelor's degree, instead of going through Grow Your Own, you could go through the university and you would earn your teacher licensure. Um, we base ours off of what your bachelor's degree is. So normally, if you went back to school, your teaching degree would be whatever your bachelor's area kind of was. Um, But sorry, I just lost my train of thought. Um, so the way the program works is it is a partnership between the three regent universities, UNI, Iowa, and Iowa State. You have to hold a bachelor's degree, have 3 years of some sort of like work experience, which we are now kind of amending based on, like you said, the shortages that are coming through. If you're just finishing your bachelor's degree and changing your mind that you want to go back to teaching, we're still investigating, like, okay, maybe that really was your pathway and you just didn't finish it. Um, Currently, we have 43 people in the intern program, and what that is they're getting paid full-time teaching while they're getting their license. So it's a 2-year program. They do 1 year of coursework where they get their methodology that they missed in their original bachelor's degree. And then their second year, they have it's an alternative teaching license called an intern license where they get a job, they get a contract, they get a salary, but they're still completing their coursework. So it's like a paid student teaching. Instead of having to take that time unpaid to student teach for so many weeks, they actually get paid on contract for doing that. One of the things Iowa did just do recently, though, is they did pass legislation that allows you to use in those paraprofessional pathways some of that experience for your student teaching, so it shortens a lot of that time. So there are good things coming through that they have passed to help reduce some of that hardship on people. Um, we have another 43 people in our first year of the program, so we're looking at potentially somewhere close to 90 that'll finish in the next 2 years. And we've got well over about 150 that have gone through since inception. So we're always looking to grow that program and continue to push for more people transitioning into this pathway.
Well, that's wonderful. So what would you say are the biggest shortages in teaching right now? Is it special education or is it vary by district? Is it vary by rural versus urban?
Yes, and yes, and yes. So
Yeah.
special education all over the place. And it's interesting when I was looking at some of the programs that other states have. In Minnesota, they actually pay out of a fund to get somebody who has a degree in something else who can get the degree in the shortage area that school has and pay for their tuition and help them get the right licensure. So it's the same thing as, like you said, Tammy, with you got somebody connected to Cedar Rapids. If you can do that in any school district, even if it's a rural district like Dow's, if they're already there and they have family on a century farm, you're probably going to keep them close by. So how do you work with the people that are close to you to do that? But I think the STEM fields are in particular shortfall, and STEM is the acronym of science, technology, engineering, and math. And part of that, I think, actually goes back to all of the energy that Iowa put into getting high school students into those fields, like Project Lead the Way, engineering, all that stuff, a decade and a half ago. And we need a similar kind of a focus on getting those really good math students and science students and the people with that practical engineering brain to also want to go into education. So I think that that's kind of an opportunity for us, is to figure out how do we have a similar emphasis as kids are leaving middle school, coming into high school, about maybe teaching would be great for you. And I'm also hoping that our new teacher pay minimums in the state that the legislature just approved last year, starting teacher pay by next school year of $50,000, which is a game changer in rural districts and other places. And even in our urban centers, I hope what we see, even though they may be paying that much already, it should bring more people into the field so that in places like Iowa City, Cedar Rapids, even Des Moines, you might have a broader pool to draw from when you're hiring. But we just have to make sure it's funded going forward so we can continue to keep up with it.
Nick or Dr. Wara, what are you seeing in the urban areas?
Well, I would agree for us it's science, but it's also music and math, but even elementary. Like in the past, we wouldn't have had elementary openings. We would have had 300 people applying for one job. And while I really appreciate the way Margaret said the state minimums are going to attract people to our profession. I think I won't speak for Nick, but I think in our urban situation, we're going to have a little bit of a crisis with it to keep some of our current staff in a more what might be perceived harder place to teach, because they might be able to teach in a smaller class setting or in a closer rural environment and make the same amount of money, where before we kind of had that little niche that you at least are going to make more money. And I'm really glad holistically that we're increasing the amount of salary, but I think some of us are going to suffer a little bit as we ebb and flow with how that looks for an urban. Just an interesting unintended consequence a little bit for us.
Yeah, we're certainly going to have to look at, what do the scales and what does the future look like and what does it look like over time, and that's going to be a piece that's going to be critical. Like, and you said the urban centers. I absolutely agree with everything that have been said thus far. The areas I think continue to be challenging, and I wanted to give a shout out to the RAPPL program because I do think there's a number of things that have assisted us. I know we've taken advantage of that. We have a handful of teachers now that have been in our system or are in our system or are currently in our system that have been a part of that, and it's been successful almost every time. And then the state has also done some unique things with CTE licensure or career and tech ed licensure related to industrial tech and some different things. We hired the last 2 years, we've hired an industrial tech teacher that has no teacher training. They have just numerous practical hours within that field, and now they're teaching industrial tech with our kids, and it's worked out well. They had a passion for working with kids, and kind of similar to when we were having the STEM discussion and saying, hey, we need to get some of these folks to come be in our classrooms. It was the same idea. They need to be in there. But things like family consumer science, any of the industrial techs, some of those continue to be very difficult. Family consumer science, I mean, we have so few programs across the state. So I think we all face in any position, it's going to depend on when you post and what it looks like. And I'm sure it looks quite a bit different in like some of the towns you were referring to, Margaret, those rural towns with the challenges they face. A lot of times I know we end up kind of stealing teachers from surrounding districts, and it helps us, but it doesn't help our education as a whole, as then some of our neighboring districts are then looking for that same position that we started looking for. So I know that can be problematic.
Well, that kind of brings us to this discussion of, did you want to add something, Angelique?
I can speak to kind of both sides because as a formerly working in a large urban district into a small rural district, that pay differential was massive for teachers. And so recruiting people to come to my building when knowing they would leave any of the urban districts around us, I mean, you're talking $15,000 difference in pay. So really marketing your school district was important. And this salary increase gives, while it does hurt kind of those urban districts that already had that bump and competitive advantage, it does give those small rural districts that have a lot harder of a time recruiting people to their area at least a little bit more of a leg, because selling your city is one of the hardest parts, I think, with recruitment. You can go to an urban district and you can do so many things, and a lot of young people, that's what they want. You can go to a rural district and you're probably going to get more of the family-oriented people that want a smaller community to raise a family. So you've got to look at your market and then what are they making? your veteran teachers are going to make more, so they're not going to want to move to a smaller district and take that pay cut, but those are the areas they want to live in. So
Hmm.
that salary, it goes great for those rural schools. It really benefited us, but it definitely does hit some of those urban districts.
So, shifting gears outside of Iowa, let's talk a little bit about our borders. So, Margaret, I know you have some stats to share. How does Iowa compare with our neighboring states like Missouri, Illinois, Minnesota, Nebraska, in terms of attracting and retaining teachers? Or are there any lessons we could learn there?
Sure, it's really interesting. Now, the Education Commission of the States, which does a lot of policy analysis of state level initiatives all across state governments in the country, they actually did a 50 state comparison in 2022 of different teacher recruitment and retention initiatives. And I'll make sure to get the link to that in the software after we get done with this so people can access that report. So I looked at the 8 states that Iowa and those around us to see what things we had in common and what things were different. I was really surprised that there are only 3 states that have minimum teacher pay in that whole group. And all the others, the other 5, funded schools, but let school boards decide how to pay teachers. And some of them had, mandated kinds of salary schedules, but not minimums. One thing that is different is additional pay for shortage areas or for minority teachers or for filling different kinds of shortages, whether that's, a content area, a geographic, or a demographic kind of a thing. Minnesota has a signing bonus of up to $8,000 for highly qualified teachers in shortage areas. Missouri actually uses it as part of their compliance with the federal government for getting highly qualified teachers in their comprehensive schools by having a mandatory incentive pay for any schools that have less than 65% graduation rate. They actually had Iowa in that database saying that we had a high needs schools grant. And so I'll write Education Commission of the States and clear this up. We actually had a high needs schools grant when Governor Branstad back in 2013 had a new Education Reform Act, and it appropriated $10 million a year for those schools with high needs. And they define that through the department looking at demographics. It could be concentration of English language learners. It could be high achievement gaps. It could be lots of students with special education service needs or high poverty. But the legislature has never funded that $10 million in the last 11 years. So the other states that are saying that this is a great way to fill some of those shortage areas probably would say to our legislature, maybe you ought to try that too. The other thing that we don't have that I think that many other states around us have, although it might be close with the RAPL program to a similarity here, is called a residency program. And that's where you have young teachers that come out with their degree, and then they have a year or 2 working as a resident, maybe alongside other teachers, to get a lot of that real on-the-ground experience and classroom management skill, and the mentoring becomes almost a full-time thing. And it has a great impact on the retention piece because teachers who go through that kind of support tend to stick around. Whereas oftentimes we'll lose teachers in the first 5 years of their experience if they don't have quality mentoring and support at the beginning. And the other thing there, out of those 8 states, Iowa and Wisconsin are the only 2 that don't have state scholarships. Now, we have loan forgiveness programs, and many other states in the Midwest have that too. After you get your degree, then if you work in education, then you get up to $4,000 a year in that Teach Iowa Scholar Grant, or that it's loan forgiveness, though. You have to get through the program. And that's different than what the other 6 states have, which are different kinds of scholarships that target academically successful students in high school, or students that represent a certain geography or a certain kind of demographic, or they're willing to go into a shortage area that the state has identified. Could be special education, for example. And then it pays their tuition up front, and if they also have loans, then it's loan forgiveness after. So that's a tough barrier for kids going into college and their parents having this discussion. You say you want to go into education, and after you worked in schools for 5 years, which is 9 or 10 years from today's decision, your loans will be partially paid for. That's different than, hey, you get free tuition if you decide to do this now. So the stakes are very different, and that seems to be something that many of our neighboring states have.
Well,
That's one of the things that we have at Rappel is we have a scholarship that does pay for tuition in the spot. So they can apply. We have two different scholarships that teachers can qualify for. One is for STEM. So if you're going into teaching into a STEM field, you can apply for those both years, and those will cover your tuition for the years that you're applying for. And then Rappel has its own through the program that's the Call to Teach, and that supplements some of those other areas that aren't necessarily STEM, because we have noticed that the most common reason people defer or drop out is because of financial responsibility. They're having to work full time while go to school full time and are usually not working in a field that's paying them as well as they need to in order to pursue the degree.
that's fascinating. On that note of the specific programs, so the policies like scholarship or what have you, Dr. Worrow and Nick, I say this to you, are there any specific policies you feel would benefit your school districts that you are aware of that are not currently funded or active laws?
Well, as Margaret mentioned, the high needs, we go ahead and we have done, and I'm sure Iowa City has done some of this as well, but we have an incentive for our special ed teachers. We put that onto our, as we put our postings up, and we have it for our teachers of diverse backgrounds. So we use it for our BIPOC, because that is a high needs for us. Our students need to see teachers that look like them. So we've gone ahead and we've taken it out of our funds. We need that to be filled at a state level. Like that absolutely, we need that for our ELL staffing. So to bring people in to decide that they're going to go into that path, when you talk about talking to our science kids going into engineering, and I would talk to them like, man, you'd be a great teacher. And they're like, Dr. Worrow, I'm not making, like, I want a car and a big house. And so it is hard to talk to our kids about when we talk about what a teacher makes. So we as districts have to think about how we build their capacity once they are our teachers. So they come in and now they're making 50. That's going to be a great grab. Now, how do we continue to help them build up? And if the state could help us do that as well, not just minimums at different levels, but continuing to support national board certification. I'm afraid we have gone away from holding people really highly accountable. It's not that I don't love that we are breaking down barriers, but sometimes we have taken the barriers down so that then when they get into the profession, they haven't had the same experiences. So if they had done a residency program, we're not going to lose them. Whereas we are having trouble retaining our first through fifth year teachers. 50% of them we have lost. And I think it is a factor of they didn't understand exactly what it was like that they were getting into. So I think retention is our new recruitment. And I think that the state can help us figure that out. How do we not just bring people in, but how can we retain the people that we have and give them those supports?
You have anything to add there, Nick?
Well, I was gonna say relatively boring and just say, it's not necessarily policy, but it's just the importance of the supplemental state aid that's provided each year for our schools, and that we're able to then, staff at the levels to which we think. I mean, some of those things are those experiences that then have impacts on young educators because, maybe that class is a little bit bigger than it needs to be, or there's some other things that we can work on. So I think that's such a critical piece. For us as a large district, we can figure out then how we want to maybe allocate some of those funds, or how we want to do some pieces to help encourage people to be in our buildings, or do some reimbursements, or do some different things. But that's just such an important part of just kind of how Iowa school finance works, and some of the things going forward there.
Margaret, I bet you have something to add there.
I was going to kind of echo that, Nick. I think one of the other things that we've seen is other states around us, like Nebraska paying for the student teaching time.
Mm.
And in Iowa, we don't do that yet. So if you're coming out of University of Northern Iowa and you have to be a student teacher for that period of, several weeks, maybe as much as a quarter, if you can go to Nebraska and be paid for it, then all of a sudden your introduction is to a Nebraska school who's going to have first crack at hiring you.
Mm.
And whatever it is that those places around us are doing, we have to be looking at that and saying, how can we make that happen in Iowa? And Iowa has been a state for a long time where you have to have specific authority to do something from the legislature, and only recently changed to this concept of, I call it home rule light, where a school board can make a policy decision as long as it's not prohibited in Iowa law. But it's uncharted territory for a lot of our district leaders to think about things like that. So we have to go through Iowa law and say, where do we have some flexibility to try something differently, and copy or emulate the things that we know are working in other states.
And one of the other things to think about are the teacher prep programs. How are we preparing the teachers before they're getting to there? Like Dr. Waro said, they're coming in those first few years and they weren't adequately prepared for what they were getting themselves into. Is that the school's fault, or is that the preparation and the program preparing them to go's fault? So one of the things that benefits us as a small program is there's two of us in our program that oversee the curriculum, and we see what they're teaching every day. We attend the classes, and ours are all taught by current educators. So they're in classrooms, they're principals, they're people that are still in education, and they're teaching relevant practices to how they teach in current classrooms. So are our traditional pathways preparing people effectively? I would argue honestly that the alternative pathways probably are teaching a little bit better or at a higher level of rigor because they're teaching based off of current experience. And I would say legislator could regulate teacher prep programs a little bit more on their standards and how they're addressing the needs of the school districts.
Hmm. So let's pivot a little bit. We talked about school districts having to sell their city and market their place. And this plays into a lot of things. It plays into welcoming, it plays into retention, and it plays into attraction. So, and Julie, maybe you can kick us off and everyone weigh in. How can local communities beyond school boards contribute to attracting and retaining talented educators? It's kind of like it takes a village, right? It takes the whole city to attract and maintain these teachers. And what are some things that you've seen success in? I know you have had some success in Waterloo, Cedar Falls area.
I think schools are really learning that they have to market themselves. Like it's not just word of mouth anymore. So you see a lot more social media aspects out there highlighting here are the awesome things going on in our districts, not just athletically. You've seen a lot of shifts in school districts starting to share out academic news, debate, speech, theater, arts, showing the broad array of what they have in their classrooms. And I think that's probably right now one of the best ways for school districts to sell themselves is by getting that message out and having people share and follow. Like you can see those metrics. Who shared what, who saw what. From Kentucky saw a post about a small district in Iowa and was like, hey, that's a really cool thing that you're doing. I've seen Waterloo do ads in media services. You see them do a lot of plugs on KWWL for things that they're doing. Iowa City Schools, Cedar Rapids Schools, I believe they've been on like KCGN, K something in that area. So getting into the media and getting it out there at any outlet, to me right now is what I'm seeing as the most beneficial for school districts themselves.
Talk about though the cities, like you had mentioned when we talked before, maybe about introducing folks to the town. Is there?
Yeah, so when we were in Waterloo for our mentoring program, one of the things that we did with anyone that was new to the district is we did like an amazing race activity where they went to different places in the community to see all aspects of like local owned businesses. Where could they go for specific resources? Where are our hospitals? Where are grocery stores? Where are hairdressers? where are the best places to eat, activities, family locations. So letting people see all the things that you have to offer will really help support, like, there are things to do in our location. And even the rural schools, pointing out what's nearby. Like if you're in a small school, how close is Des Moines? How close is is it to go to the I-Cubs or go to like in Waterloo, the Blackhawks? So just understanding what's out there, going to different career fairs in different states. That's what we saw was a draw-in for those younger teachers. They want a social life. They want to be able to go out and do things. And some places around Iowa, if you're in a rural school district, your social life is about an hour away. So how do we bring them in and, show them that they can still get there and have that time?
Nick, can you talk a little bit about, some of that welcoming that you've done in Iowa City?
Yeah, some of the things that we've highlighted because we have prioritized some of our working on diverse hiring. It is doing some things to make sure that some of our teachers of color that come work with us, they know about other, Black-owned businesses or some of the other opportunities within the community. I think some of that is just so welcoming when you're coming into a new area for whatever it might be, and you can find some of those connection points. You can find people who may have a similar background or similar experiences to you. So our equity team has done some really nice things to make some connections with our new teachers and try to support our students, our new teachers of color in that manner. So that's something that I think is critical and sometimes maybe not thought about in all of our areas of Iowa because Iowa is not as diverse as some other states that may surround us. So, but that's just something that we always need to be thinking about and what we can do to welcome people to our communities as well.
I just as a question, I don't know the answer to it, so I'm hoping you guys can fill me in. Do the larger school districts have things like, employee resource groups that people can join across school districts or across schools? So if they are new to the area, they could join a new resident resource group or something like that. Maybe that's something that you guys have done.
Yes, we do. We have different affinity groups that are starting, and every year we add another. But new teachers is one of our affinity groups, and they have people that just are designated to work with them that aren't part of the mentoring induction and the other like work part of their life. That's their time to get together. And we have our equity affinity. We have LGBTQ affinity groups. So those grow as people ask, as we start seeing need. Hey, I think that sounds like a great affinity group, and the support there to help them get going and meet. But it's another layer into their life, right? And so sometimes they have to choose, do we have time after school to be part of that or part of this? And I think we always have to be considerate of all the extra time we are putting onto our new teachers. So how we can build that into their life is something we probably all need to work on.
Hmm.
I'd add from a rural standpoint there, Liz, I was at the National Rural Education Association annual conference last year, and they were talking about different strategies of building relationships. And there was a story about a hotel that was vacant in a rural area that had been converted into housing. And so for new teachers, they encouraged them to live there, and the district subsidized part of their rent in exchange for volunteer hours in the community. And those volunteer hours hooked those young teachers up to things that they wanted to do. And it could be, volunteer in a church or volunteer with the Little League baseball team or whatever. But then they were making relationships and friends outside of school and had that community support and structure. But yet they lived in the place that had the coffee shop, that they all came home after work to the same place and they got to know each other.
Hmm.
And so when we're really conscious about creating opportunities for building those kinds of relationships, both in school and outside of school, I think it helps people not just feel welcome, but be part of the community.
Hmm. Wow.
Can I piggyback on that? Because we've had a lot of heat here about closing a couple school buildings in Cedar Rapids. And we have the exciting part of, I think we don't talk about the coolness of what might happen next, is one of our buildings. The developer is moving it into the same type of thing. It's going to be housing for apartments. And in that, part of the agreement is at a minimum, 2 of those apartments have to be for teachers we are bringing in. So I don't think 2 is enough, but you can only do so much when you first start. And it's this big picture conversation of how do we bring a couple of teachers in from another state that has never been to Iowa, but maybe you might come together, or you might come with 3 people and they're willing to stay in a couple of apartments that we are also having our students help build. All of that is a great way to start looking at how do we reach out to other communities and have you come work with us and stay with us. So that is a really important thing to look at, Margaret. How do we house them? Let's and keep them together and feel like they're important.
Yeah, especially I would imagine that's an issue in Iowa City, Nick. Like, what kind of resources do you offer to the new teachers as they come through?
Well, I was actually going to speak to, I do think some of this housing conversation is probably going to be one of the things that comes up as some time within the state of Iowa. I know in other areas that is a thing that is provided to, or there is some subsidized housing, or there's some different things within other states. I was at the University of Iowa's job fair last year, and my table was surrounded by ones from Texas and California and different places, and that was part of it. Is there is kind of some things that they have to work on there. So I do think that's a piece. I mean, one of the things that is probably a benefit within the Iowa City community is, people do come here a lot of times with the purpose of wanting to be near the university. So that helps us a little bit. I mean, I think that's kind of one of our advantages as a school district is the fact that people have connections, whether it ends up being their employment or it ends up being just the desire to be near the college environment, the university environment, or being able to go to Kinnick easily or whatever it might be. So that's certainly something. So we're probably able to ride on some coattails there a little bit of enjoying the fact that it is an area that people choose to live in that changes things a little bit. But the one thing that's unique to our community also is there's a lot more diversity than people probably realize in regards to people who move to this area and refugees from other countries and different things of that nature. So then trying to work with them to help them be acclimated. And a lot of times that's not as much our staff right away, but it is our families. It is some of our new students and different things of that nature, and just helping that broader school community feel connected.
When you're looking ahead, Margaret, to Iowa legislature, I know it's a little early now for the session for next year, but what are some of the things that you're keeping an eye on when we go into next season of legislation?
Well, there are so many. And one of them is that we've started that minimum teacher pay, which is next year $50,000 for beginning teachers up to 12 years of experience. And then once a teacher has 12 years or more experience, it's going to bump up to 62,000. So it's really not going to work to retain staff if they are stuck at 50,000 for 12 years. Or if our teachers who have 12 years of experience are making the same as our teachers with 30 years of experience. So the second phase of this, and it's interesting I use the word phase because we have had maybe 7 different times going back all the way to the 80s when we've had the legislature weigh in on increasing teacher pay. And they usually did 2 things. They set a new minimum and they created resources for all the other teachers. And this is the first time when that hasn't happened in the policy. So we have this phenomenon, it's called salary compaction, when all the salaries stay the same and they don't grow over time. So that's one thing I know school leaders from all over the state are talking to legislators about is how do we provide resources to make sure that that retention piece makes sense and that we keep people in the system over the long haul and then adequately funding that. I think we'll still talk about, let's get that 10 million in there for the high needs schools that really have sometimes large class sizes and huge needs for students that we have to address. And then we'll keep chipping away on, and I call this tinkering around the edges. What's the next thing we can do to provide some flexibility so it's easier for districts to meet a requirement while meeting the needs of students? And that happens all the time. The other thing I think we're going to talk about is full day preschool. And there's a really strong research base that says that students who don't have quality preschool are 25% more likely to need special education services throughout their educational career. So if we can do quality preschool for a full day or preschool with wraparound childcare, two things happen. One of those is we prevent the growing need of more special education teachers later. So that's kind of like freeing up teachers to maybe teach in the area they really want to without having to steer them into special ed. The other thing it does is it helps our students who have that quality four-year-old preschool experience become better capable of reading on grade level as they go through the system, more successful, more likely to stay in school and graduate from high school. And it has all of those academic ripple effects throughout their experience.
Are there anyone else have any concerns about legislation they want to bring up? Or
I would just follow up on the piece related to preschool. I think there's so many advantages to that, and I'm glad to hear that that's going to hopefully be part of the conversation, something that we can continue to encourage. We've expanded our preschool offerings in Iowa City, and that's something we want to continue to do because of the importance of that early childhood education and what it can do. And there's such a wide array of experiences that kids have when they come into our kindergarten classrooms. So anything we can do to support in that preschool level, I think is so critical for our kids. So
yeah. Okay, just pivoting a
Liz,
little bit. Yeah, go ahead.
I should have added one more thing because the federal funding was pandemic funding for that teacher and para registered apprenticeship grant program. That expires in 2025. So that program, the program like RAPPL, there are other programs where the legislature could step up and invest more in those and make sure that there's a funding stream to support quality grow your own programs or repurposing somebody's energy that they've had in a prior career, whatever that is. The state invests in that, and that helps us keep Iowans in Iowa and make sure that our teachers have colleagues around them. So we're not overworking the teachers that we currently have. And no matter what that is, let's keep being creative and finding those solutions.
Well, speaking to that, I just wondered, what role do you believe technology could or should play in this process of educating new teachers or teacher engagement moving forward? Do you feel like technology plays a role in this, or?
Oh, so many. We don't have another hour to talk about.
Yeah.
I was just going to say one thing real quickly. I had a great conversation yesterday about artificial intelligence. And I think one of the toughest things that we put on our teachers is how many papers they have to grade for students to be writing constantly. And when there are new tools that can help take some of that work off the plate of the teacher so the teacher can really focus on just what's the one thing that they're looking for while still giving good feedback to students, we should keep exploring those.
All right. So let's see. Given the challenges of this, the state of all of the shortages that we have in the state, we have had some case studies that you guys mentioned. Are there any ones that you would like to highlight of what's working? Because Iowa Ideas is all about sharing ideas that are working and generating ideas for our path forward with Iowans. Anyone want to share a case study or a particular situation? It could be related to a topic we already talked about that you feel that the audience should know about.
I think one thing I could add in is last spring, starting July 1st, the legislature did pass a file that allowed people who had a bachelor's degree and qualified for an endorsement to get a teacher intern license that first year of a program. So they had to be accepted into an alternative program, have an offer from a school district, and then they could qualify for that license. So they actually can be on a contract for the full 2 years they're going through the program. So it'd be similar to like going into a CTE authorization. So they have career and technical experience, they get that license, they don't have any teaching experience, but they can use their background and their work experience to go into the classroom while they learn that. I think that's one of the things that we might be doing right is honoring work experience and honoring our education in giving people those opportunities so that we can fill those spaces with people that want to go back into teaching before they have to get through the 2 years of a program.
Hmm.
They can do all of it at the same time. It's rigorous and it's not easy, but they can be paid and go through and do a tradition. It's like an apprenticeship, a registered apprenticeship program that you do for a trade. So I think that's one of the things that the state is doing right is allowing more opportunity to get into the teaching profession and allowing people to make those career changes that might not have because they didn't want to go through a traditional teacher college prep program or a master's program.
I'll piggyback on that a little bit, and we've also have a new way to get a license with as a content level mastery, and so if someone has a master's in an area, they could get, if we give them an offer. So we have a person, a science teacher that we're doing with right now. She has a master's in engineering and science, and the beauty of what and Julie just shared is they get a little bit of teaching experience while they're doing it. Where in this situation, they don't have any teaching at all. They're going to go right into this. And we did it with a Spanish teacher as well. And we have to figure out how we maneuver that a little better to give some of that time so there is an understanding of the teaching process, because we have made it very easy for our masters, someone content specific masters, to be able to get a teaching license. We probably then as the districts need to think about how we support them differently with that, the teaching aspect of it and the management, which is very different. So that might be something that the state could look at on mentoring and induction supports for those people, because it's not an initial license and they're very initial.
Oh.
So that would be something to throw out there. While I love the barriers are coming down for some things, then we still need to put a safety net in so people are successful and happy and enjoying what they're doing.
Yeah. So how would they get that classroom management training and the curriculum pedagogy training without that?
See, I kind of wonder, Tammy, if we can think about our teacher leadership and compensation program in a way. We've got instructional coaches, we've got mentor teachers, master teachers, model teachers, and what if we had a new teacher leader concept of the teacher who supported any of these apprentices or interns or people that are in classrooms at the very beginning, and that becomes that role of support. And I'm a little worried that our teacher leadership and compensation money is kind of singled out to be diverted to pay for other things in schools with new flexibility there, when we really, more than ever, with all of these expanded pathways to get into classrooms, we really need that support of boots on the ground in the school district to make sure teachers are successful and to make sure that kids don't have to miss out in the year or two of the teacher getting their skills up to par.
Yeah, I 100% agree with you, Tammy. Those first few years of support for anybody on any type of initial first teaching license are pivotal. And the legislature needs to help beef up those mentoring and induction requirements and supports. Mentor teacher can't do it all because that's a full-time teacher. And I think post-secondary education can help with figuring out what are pathways for them to get the methodology that they need. So when you go on a CTE authorization, you do have to go back and take some methodology coursework to get your full license. And I believe you still have to do that for the content specialization too, and maybe not, but I know you do for the CTE, but we don't have a clear pathway of how they do that. They have to search, the teacher individually has to search and contact different places to figure out how they can get that coursework done. So programs like mine should start looking into, could we offer like a side track? Could some of our classes fit the need for those people to get their methodology so that they have a specific resource to go to instead of putting it all on them. I think that's one of the things that we don't do very clearly is we give you this license, but we don't tell you how to go about finishing that license.
Hmm. Well, we just have a few minutes left here. We didn't really talk about partnerships and collaborations very much, but it sounds like there's some conversation here about potential partnerships and collaborations that could happen. I don't know if the wheels are turning for anyone about potential partnerships or collaborations that maybe we could explore.
One thing that comes to mind for me is how do we keep teachers engaged in the content and relevant and keep their skills current? And there are lots of business school district partnerships where during the summer, a teacher can go work in the field in which they're teaching and get some of that experience and then bring some of that back. And I think that we'll see a little bit more of that tie as we're being required to, and rightfully so, make sure that kids have work-based learning experiences too, because that partnership is going to have to develop there as well. And teachers are going to have a little bit more connection with people in the fields in which they're teaching. And I think that's really exciting.
Yeah,
I
and
think
one thing,
professional development funding for teachers to be individualized is really important. Districts have PD funding, but it's a large bucket of PD funding and it's usually driven by district PD and not by individuals' needs. And I think that, like what Margaret said, it's really important. Give this opportunity for your math teachers to make sure that they're up to date on current math trends and not just district initiatives. Individualized PD, I think, is really important going forward.
and just to
I'd
clarify,
love
you
to
mean
do,
professional development, correct?
Yes, sorry, yes, professional development, professional learning.
I'd love to just do a broad shout out of parental involvement and support when we talk about partnerships. The communities, especially around some of our harder serving schools, might not have a PTA. We talk about retention and keeping people, helping people feel valued. So whether they're our paras or our teachers, bus drivers, if our community could help educators in this state feel valued and cared about, that goes a long way. And I know that's just a big, vast ask, but that assume positive intention, assume that people are trying to do the right thing for our kids, and really just reaching out and being a part of your child's education in a supportive way. Or if you know a school doesn't have people that can do that because families are so busy working, have the company by there reach out and take that over and own that we're all in this together and that this is a hard job, and thank people for doing it.
I can hear the passion in your voice. Nick, any closing thoughts?
Well, I was just similar. I think, parents are obviously an essential part of our school community, but so is just the community as a whole. There's so many people who have their businesses within a community, and they do that intentionally in all sizes of our towns, and they want to be a part of how they can support education, how they can support schools, how they can support our kids and all the different things they're a part of. So, as we continue to make those partnerships with our local businesses, with our local just entities that exist, colleges, different people. I mean, all those are going to benefit us as a school district, but it's also going to benefit them, right? It's making that connection and having those positive relationships with those that are a part of that larger community. And that's just such an essential part. Some of the great things that we've been able to do has been because of community sponsorship and people outside, even private individuals saying, hey, this is important and we want to be a part of that in whatever way we can. And I think whenever we can foster those, that's going to help us all.
All right. Well, with that, we'll leave it there. Thank you all to our panelists today with your insightful contributions and all of you for joining us today. I'd like to thank our sponsor, ITC Midwest, and you can continue the conversation in the Whova app and share your thoughts or connect with our speakers today. And again, thank you everyone for participating.
Thank you, everybody.
Bye-bye.